What's going on, guys? Welcome to Everything Always. My name is Michael Roman. What if I told you Venom was already in the MCU? That it took place in San Francisco sometime before the beginning of Infinity War? That would be the easiest explanation, right? And if Marvel and Sony really planned on merging their fledgling David of a Spider-Verse with the Goliath MCU, then one of the easiest things to do if Kevin Feige could get control of all of the properties would just make sure going forward they did everything right. And if, say, the next property in that Venomverse were Morbius, and they were to share a character that had already shown up not only in the MCU but specifically the Spider-Man franchise, wouldn't that just connect everything here going forward? And while Marvel and Sony haven't said a word officially about how they're going to do this, heck, I'm guessing they didn't even know when they signed the contract in the first place, there's a couple of headlines recently, including one specific interview we broke here at the channel 2 or 3 weeks back that basically confirm that Morbius, Venom, and the rest of this fledgling Spider-Verse is already in the MCU, and going forward they're going to make sure to give us Easter eggs that let us know that until eventually they cross the whole thing over. We're going to break down both reports and why this is so important going forward, especially with the brand new report that there's a character sharing agreement, and we'll see this first up in Morbius. But first, if you could grab the subscribe button, we're giving away 2 PlayStation 4 Pros as well as a whole slew of other Marvel related stuff throughout the holiday. All you have to do, hit the subscribe button, then hit the notification bell, leave a like and a comment on this video, and if you want, stick around to the end of the video. We'll get into all the giveaway stuff again there. So all apologies if my prologue was a little convoluted. It's just been building for the last 3 or 4 weeks, little headlines here and there that have all culminated with this latest report, all revolving around J.K. Simmons, J. Jonah Jameson, not the J. Jonah Jameson you saw in the original Spider-Man trilogy, but rather the J. Jonah Jameson that we saw in Spider-Man Far From Home. He will be the first character to have shown up not only in the Spider-Man franchise, but the Marvel Cinematic Universe, to also show up in Sony's Spider-Verse, reprising his role for a short cameo in the upcoming Morbius movie. Now, we knew this was coming based on an interview that we covered here at the channel some 3 weeks ago, that Morbius would actually be in the MCU. It was Tyrese Gibson, who's cast in the movie as presumably an FBI agent hunting down Morbius, who told his friend Charlemagne the God, and then on a comic book cast, Comic Kings revealed that his contract had 3 additional movies after the first initial Morbius movie, and that those movies would actually be a part of the MCU. Now, the host is shocked and actually says, wait, do you know something the rest of us don't? And Charlemagne the God says, yeah, I don't see why he'd have any reason to lie, and apparently he didn't. Now, if Morbius truly has a J.K. Simmons, John Jonah Jameson cameo in it, then that's all the reason to believe that these are one and the same, that the Venom movie already took place in the MCU, and that going forward with a little vision and co-production from Kevin Feige on all of their properties, they can make sure to avoid any inconsistencies. Another pragmatic reason to believe this is the case is that they're so small, the universe hasn't expanded yet. Rather than figuring out how Spider-Man would cross over into a different universe for the Venomverse, why not just make it a part of the MCU? Since there's only 1 or 2 movies, there's not that much inconsistency. Plus, coincidentally or not, and fortunately for Sony, having it take place over in San Francisco on the opposite coast from where most of the Avengers are most of the time, and if you put it before Infinity War, when half of the Avengers are on the run, then it goes a long way in explaining why no superheroes showed up when 2 giant alien blob monsters are going at it in the middle of the city. This makes the most sense from having to do almost no cleanup. Now, of course, there is that very famous quote from Kevin Feige right after the deal was signed between Sony and Disney's Marvel Studios sharing agreement for these 2 new movies for Spider-Man staying in the MCU, that said specifically Spider-Man is the only superhero with the superpower to cross over into different cinematic universes. But you have to give him a little leeway here. This was just after the new contract was signed, and as I said in the prologue, there's a real good chance they said we'll figure this out going forward. I think it's a real missed opportunity for both companies not to have their universes one and the same. Plus, if this truly does lead down the road to a Secret Wars, then their universe can easily play the planet of the symbiotes, as came to us from a huge leak. Now, we're not going to go over that in this video. I'll just make sure to link that video at the end of that, so that's a completely different discussion for a different day. But there's all these rogue villains for Spider-Man. There's this entire Spider-Verse with an awesome Spider-Man in Tom Holland, someone who wants to keep the role, and both companies want him to keep the role. Considering Tom Holland went to both companies and said, hey, I want to be in the MCU, then it follows that Sony said, hey, if we want to keep Tom Holland, we need to be in the MCU as well. And if they could have worked out the money and Kevin Feige was open to it and had the bandwidth to help with co-production, then this makes the most sense for every company making the most money money. That way you don't have to worry about which villains make it into the Spider-Verse and which villains make it into the MCU. They don't have to worry about using the Sinister Six and what's going to happen down the road. They can just keep signing new movies and new contracts as they go and not worry about which characters are which. If it's one in the same universe and the contracts end up running out, then there's no explainers to be had, no fixers needed. They just need to keep the movies over at Sony up to the quality that we're used to in the MCU. Again, with Kevin Feige's help in co-production, I'm sure that they can do that. Look, we all loved Spider-Verse, and that was almost exclusively Sony, with very little in the way of animation rights coming from Marvel Studios. Now, you'll have to wonder if Sony really lucked out and was able to get their franchises into the MCU to cash in on a brand as big as that, with really having done none of the work to build it except for owning one of the key pieces in Spider-Man. If they'll go and screw it up somehow by making some crazy Spider-Verse bonanza, as has been rumored by multiple headlines stemming back to reports since before the release of Spider-Man Far From Home, that they'd bring back Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield alike for a live-action Spider-Verse movie, that's completely inconsistent with the MCU in all ways. They could include Venom somehow and keep the universe the way that the MCU wants it, but if they go and do that, then they're really opening a can of worms, something that I don't think that the MCU wants to do. Now, I may be wrong. When we watch the Multiverse of Madness with Doctor Strange, they may include all sorts of crazy things, and I also may be wrong in jumping to conclusions that Sony would be first to go ahead and screw it up. But consider this: they've brought J.K. Simmons, John Jonah Jameson back into the MCU, the original John Jonah Jameson that showed up in the original trilogy. So if they actually wanted this live action crossover movie, they'd have one character that could connect it all together if they wanted to do something that's silly. Again, look, maybe I'm being unfair and shouldn't call it silly, but you've got to admit Sony's track record is shaky at best, and if they've gotten a chance, if they've windfalled into just being a part of the MCU after they've achieved such greatness, then you just go ahead and go with the plan. There doesn't need to be ego. There doesn't need to be direction. You don't need to be greedy. You just need to get in the boat and let Kevin Feige steer, because so far he's been steering you to boatloads of money, pun intended, all round. Guys, I'm sure you agree with me a little on this, but let me know specifically what you think in the comments about all of this. A, do you think that this is the path of least resistance, that they're definitely just going to include them into the MCU considering that they're only one movie deep so far? B, if they do that, do you think Sony's going to hold up their end of the bargain, meaning do you think they're going to be able to continue to deliver movies of quality like we expect from the MCU and make it so that the canon is more ubiquitous than one would think, that the movies do hold some cohesiveness? It's not, hey, those are the Sony MCU movies, not the Marvel MCU movies. And if you don't agree with me at all, I'm all ears as to what you think. How do you think Tom Holland's going to travel between the multiverses? Do you think it's as crazy as it sounds and that he'll somehow leave our 616 MCU continuity and plop up somewhere over in the Venomverse for Sony? I think that makes it more complicated than it has to be and really precludes characters crossing over, especially characters like Morbius crossing over with MCU's Blade, which was a part of that rumor during the Comic Kings interview between Charlemagne the God and their host. I'll make sure to link that interview down below, as well as our video covering it. And the last thing I'll leave you with before we get into the giveaway stuff is this. I've mentioned it in at least 2 or 3 videos in the last couple of weeks. They've already achieved everything that they thought that they could, or their wildest dreams could conclude, with the Infinity Saga over at the MCU. Kevin Feige has taken a bit of an exhale. You could see it all over their faces in the way that they were willing to answer questions in the press conferences after Avengers Endgame release. They did it, so to speak. Nike says just do it. Well, they did. And in doing so, having achieved this and being able to take the mental exhale, not worrying if anything was going to quote unquote screw it up, I think something like Sony's Venomverse becoming a part of the MCU becomes not only a possibility but a probability, whereas before the release of Avengers Endgame and the culmination of the Infinity Saga, it would have been an absolute no-go from Kevin Feige. He wasn't going to let anything or anybody screw that up. Again, let me know what you guys think in the comments, and quickly, let's get into the giveaway stuff before I let you go. We're still giving away 2 PlayStation 4 Pros, the next of which is at the 500,000 subscriber mark. We're headlong into that and should easily hit that by next month's end. All you have to do, hit the subscribe button, then hit the notification bell, leave a like and a comment on this video and it'll automatically enter you to win the rest of the prizes we're giving away at the channel throughout the holiday season and the rest of the year, including some of the limited edition Infinity Saga box sets. We've gotten our hands on 2 here at the channel. We'll be officially and formally announcing those rules, but as far as the ones here at the channel, all the same rules will apply. Hit the subscribe button, then hit the notification bell, leave a like and a comment on this video, and the more videos you like and comment on, because it's truly random, the better chance you have of winning. If you've been with me since the beginning, those of you who truly listen to the channel up until these last seconds, I cannot thank you enough for the support you've shown me so far this year, and I look forward to sharing the rest of the MCU, especially as we ramp up into 2020 and 2021. Thanks again, guys. My name's Michael Roman. This is Everything Always. Stick around. We'll be posting again real soon.